Identify and prioritize use cases that matter. We are seeing everywhere how many different things can I apply AI to, and actually you probably don't need more use cases, you want better ones. Mm-hmm. So let's just recap on a little stat before we get into the content for this lesson. Now, AI projects frequently begin with solutions looking for problems, leading to misalignment and disappointment. Now, this stat from McKinsey shows that 78% of companies have adopted AI in at least one business function. However, only 17% of those that adopted AI reported tangible business impact. So the takeaway here is that adoption alone is not enough. Organizations must close the gap between adoption and value capture. So let's get back into the prioritization grid that we spoke about earlier, because we kind of explained how you divide up your grid for business value, feasibility. You know, we had strategic bets, we had quick wins, but we're going to go into some more detail now, aren't we, and talk about some more specific cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about the value, the business value you might see from each of those categories as well, which I think is quite important. So
where do you want to start?
Let's start with big bets.
Okay.
So this is, as a recap, this is high value, super easy to implement.
Yeah. No, high value, hard to implement.
We keep getting this mixed up. So high value, hard to implement. That's your big bets. And the things that we spoke about earlier on is like personalized product recommendations, dynamic pricing in maybe hospitality or transport.
Yeah.
So what does that mean from a business value perspective?
So let's think about, I like the customer experience and retention example we've got in big bets. So personalized product recommendations. Now, the value there is super high because it's really tangible. It's revenue generating. Yeah. You know, it's driving better recommendations to customers. You know, ultimately that's going to lead to increased spend and probably like higher value spend.
And when you consider as well, if you're not doing it, your competitors probably are.
Yeah.
So that customer retention experience piece is going to be critical because if you're not doing it, you won't have that strategic advantage anymore.
Yeah. Now, the feasibility is low. This is really hard to do. And you've got a number of reasons. The data that you are feeding in here is super critical. You need customer data. You need up-to-date customer data. You need the right customer data. You need to put the right weightings on customer data. It's probably got to be live. You know, it's so the you know, as we spoke about in previous modules, AI is algorithms. It's how, you know, it's input data and it's getting a result out of it. The implementation, the hardness of the implementation here comes from that data. The personalized product recommendations need to give us. The other example we've got in big bets is dynamic pricing in hospitality and transport. So things like you're getting a flight, the price goes up because everyone's trying to get on the same flight to Ibiza. You know, not for us, unfortunately, right now. But, you know, or hotels. You know, you're booking a hotel, price is going up, price is going down. So, again, there's a huge opportunity to make that quicker, make that faster, make that more up-to-date, more relevant using AI to drive the dynamic pricing. Again, super valuable, really easy to connect that to greater revenue, you know, less hotel rooms that are going unbooked, you know, less flights, seats on planes that are going unbooked. But again, really dependent on the data that's coming in. You know, you've got to have really good data. You've got to have the right data. It's got to be up to date. So what's in quick wins? So
as a recap, this is super high value, easy to do.
Yeah.
So quick wins, things like strategic decision support. So scenario planning using AI simulations. So it's fairly easy to do, can give us those immediate impacts that we've spoken about.
Yeah.
Risk and compliance. So using AI to review of legal or compliance documents. Again, really straightforward. People can do that with ChatGPT, or Copilot. Now, what we would say is if you're doing it from a risk and a compliance point of view, you might want to have a specifically trained model on the topic you're talking about. But it's still fairly straightforward to implement that from a value point of view.
I think the key difference between the quick wins and the big bets, particularly in terms of implementation, is the style of the data that you're having to feed it. You know, if we think about our big bets, the personalized product recommendations, dynamic pricing, huge data sets, live data sets, very personalized. Quick wins, if we think about strategic planning using AI simulations, you know, you are going to be giving it certain amounts of data to then, but it's not quite as complex.
Yeah.
And
something with, legal documents, for example, it's like a clear set of rules to be like, hey, we need to make sure we don't break this set of rules. So it's a lot simpler when we think back to that fluency model, in the sense of we're saying, hey, can you review this document for, have we broken the law?
Yeah.
Very simple in comparison to personalising a recommendation on an individual basis, because the reality is everybody is different and so unique that data is going to be unique.
Yeah. And even if you think about, as a real example, say you've got a 50-page PDF, which is maybe your strategy for the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. You feed that to your generative AI model. You say, can you critically evaluate it based on certain criteria? Yes, it's fairly sophisticated prompts, and you're asking it to do something quite sophisticated, and you can have a conversation. But that data set is straightforward compared to, 100,000 lines of, personalized product recommendations or customer personas and so on.
Yeah.
Let's look at incremental gains next.
Yeah. So incremental gains are things like operational efficiency, predictive maintenance in manufacturing. So we spoke about this a little bit, but this is where you no longer wait until an issue happens. It predicts it based on the usability of whatever that machinery is. Like, you imagine when you're in your car, you're driving along and you get a notification to say, based on your driving style, how many miles you've done since you last changed your tyres, we predict you're going to need new tyres in 2 months' time. Yeah. As opposed to it just flagging up to say, hey, you need them now.
Yeah.
Like, it's that predictive piece to give you that forefront look at what's going on. So that's super easy from a feasibility point of view. Potentially the value is lower because the reality is you're going to, let's say from a manufacturing, you're going to need to change that part or that process anyway, right? I'm going to need new tyres at some point. Yeah. Whether I know that I need them now or whether I know I need them in 2 months' time, from a value perspective, it doesn't change much. Yeah. But the predictive piece, having that insight further in advance, just helps from an operational perspective.
And if you think about like a asset infrastructure, utilities type example, if you've got assets out in the field and you send a guy out to go and repair something, the predictive maintenance actually, the value that you're gaining from sending someone out to go and fix it versus telling them to go out and fix it a bit sooner. In the short term, you might not, that might not be a massive number, but I think over time that starts to add up, and so you could actually see some of that predictive maintenance, those predictive maintenance initiatives, they could shift kind of diagonally up from being in the kind of easy to implement, low business value. They could shift up to being high business value depending on the time and the time span that they're implemented over.
And the reality is that's because if your process, if your manufacturing process, your system, whatever that is, doesn't go down, whilst you're not having that, you're not getting the immediate return on investment, it does potentially mean you're not having the future impact of maybe, I don't know, you're in the water industry, if a pump goes down and people don't have water for a considerable amount of time, that may cost you in compensation as a business. Yeah. So it's potentially saving in the long run, and that's why you're talking about it shifting to that high value piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Invoice automation is another example in incremental gains. So AI models extracting and validating invoice data. I think we've seen similar things actually with some of our clients, but fairly easy to do. The business value, you could argue, is it's not, maybe it doesn't seem crazy, but actually you're speeding up people's day-to-day jobs. You're creating lots of kind of like micro efficiencies that again over time they're going to add up, and that's a good example there. What about in hard slogs?
So this one's a little bit more interesting because we know that there's low value and it's really difficult to do. Yeah. So these are the ones that you maybe would spend less time in or less investment in. So what we've got here is the concept testing in R&D, so research and development. So things like simulating customer reactions to test ideas. Yeah. Now it's not real because you're simulating it, so that there's no guarantee that model or that prediction that it gives you is correct. And that's why we talk about it's very difficult to do because you're simulating people. Yeah. And as much as there is a lot of evidence to suggest that we think in patterns and we think the same, that you still never know how a customer's going to respond. And that also testing only ideas, not actually real life products or scenarios as well. So very difficult to do, potentially really low value, but still something that it's not necessarily saying never touch that space.
Yeah.
It's just using the right initiatives to sit there.
As a leader, you probably want to think about being really clear on any initiatives you have that do sit in hard slogs, and that's okay. You sometimes want to have that space where people can try new things, they can be a bit bold, they can innovate, but you want to put a wrapper around it. We're going to we're going to time box this, we're going to give you a set budget, a set amount of time, see what you can discover, but let's just be clear that is not necessarily, a strategic bet. It's not a quick win. It's something we're doing that's a bit innovative, but, just be clear on what it is.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Microsoft's Business Strategy AI Hub.
Yeah. So Microsoft's Business Strategy AI Hub can help inspire AI use case ideation and brainstorming. So there's a 3-step process that we've been working on. And actually starting with Microsoft Business's Strategy AI Hub, it showcases cross-industry use cases and demos highlighting how AI delivers business impact. So that'll get the ideas flowing. Adaptivate as a consulting firm leverages the AI Hub as a springboard and applies proven frameworks to shape and prioritize use cases into scalable initiatives. So a lot of the work that we've done with Adaptivate is around that middle bit. And then finally, for businesses and leaders, so businesses and leaders can then identify and implement high impact, high feasibility AI use cases tailored to the business priorities and readiness levels. So what this kind of 3-step process is really doing is it's almost like a nice ideation. It's like, what is out there? What have other people done? As when we do consulting work, so often, clients will say, well, tell us what our competitors are doing, or tell us what, the big tech companies, the fancy tech companies, the Teslas, the Googles, what are they doing? And we'll copy them. So you get some inspiration from the Strategy Hub. Adaptivate, the consulting work, you then start to tailor it, you then start to apply it, you then start to think about where the use cases are and where, the scale initiatives come. And then finally, it's actually up to you as businesses, as leaders within those businesses, to then start to identify the high impact use cases. Now, just to recap, you can't do that until you've got really clear on your goals, clear on business goals, business priorities. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to tailor the fancy, cool, interesting AI initiatives to what actually matters for your business. So in order to go through this 3-step process of looking at all the fancy use cases, got to be really clear on business goals first.
Yeah, absolutely. So our 3 key takeaways for this lesson. High impact use cases start with clear business pain points, not with the technology. Many AI projects fail because they prioritize novelty over measurable outcomes. Tools like Microsoft's AI Hub can help spark relevant, feasible ideas aligned to strategy.
So your challenge for this lesson is to go back to your prioritization matrix and think about the high business value, low business value versus high feasibility and low feasibility, and build on what you've perhaps been noting down before. So what examples can you think of from within your business, within your industry? Where do they fit within that matrix? Where do they fit into those buckets? And have a think about what would have to happen in your industry for perhaps those initiatives to move around and what that would mean for you and your business and your industry.